From Philharmonic Hall in Lincoln Center, home of the world's greatest musical events, another program of New York Philharmonic Young People's Concerts, under the musical direction of Leonard Bernstein. And here is Leonard Bernstein.
My dear young friends, this is a very special occasion, a most unusual one, because this is the first time in all our 11 years of Young People's programs that we are running a music quiz of any kind. And I believe it's the first time anybody has in the history of television. Now, quizzes are funny things. There are people who love them and people who loathe them. To one person, you have only to mention the word quiz and he runs to the nearest exit. And another person will respond with, "Yippee, a game, can't wait." I suppose the difference is between those people who are madly eager to show off what they know and those others who are scared at the thought of being exposed as ignorant. Well, this quiz is intended for neither type because it will have very little to do with knowledge, that is, with straight information on composers, titles, themes, dates, that sort of thing. What it will have mostly to do with is musicality, that is, how sensitive you are to music, how much you really like it, how deeply it gets to you, how alert your ears are, and how much they retain of what they hear. Of course, there'll have to be some questions involving knowledge. No quiz could exist without them. But the emphasis will be on the enjoyment of music. And for that reason, I hope this quiz will turn out to be enjoyable, even if it is a sort of test. That it won't be like a school test. Now, all you need for this quiz is a sheet of paper and a pencil. And those of you here in the hall have already been furnished with same. And those of you viewing on television have exactly 60 seconds to equip yourselves while we mark time musically with the following. Now that you've got your paper and pencil, may I say you don't have to write down a thing about that music we just played. I'll just tell you straight out that it was the end of Brahms' First Symphony, the last 60 seconds of it. I don't expect all of you to have known that, or even most of you, but I do hope you got this much out of it. One, that it's the end of something. That's fairly obvious, right? Two, that it is probably the end of a symphony or some very large grand piece. Three, that it's probably a German symphony because of its very German seriousness. And four, that it's not what's known as early music. It couldn't be because of the size and richness of that orchestra. Nor can it be late romantic music like Richard Strauss or Mahler because the orchestra isn't that enormous or fancy. And it certainly can't be modern music. So you'd probably place it somewhere between classical and romantic. Let's say it's Beethoven or Brahms. And if you guessed Brahms without knowing the piece, you were simply brilliant. And if you didn't, no hard feelings. You were probably too busy looking for a pencil. But anyway, that's the sort of detective work I hope you'll be doing during this quiz. And now we're ready to begin it. We're going to start by playing you an entire piece, only 4 minutes long. It's a very famous piece, so those of you who know it will recognize it immediately and bully for you. But if you do recognize it, please don't yell out the answer, because it'll spoil everyone else's fun. And those of you who don't know it, which I guess is most of you, will have a chance during the course of the music to guess at 5 answers regarding it. Now, write these down. The composer's name, the composer's nationality, his approximate dates. Am I going too fast for you? Name, nationality, dates. The style of the music, and, if possible, the form of the music. I repeat, composer, nationality, period, style, and form. Now, of course, if you also guess the name of the piece, that's gravy. By style, what I mean is the most general interpretation of that word, like Baroque, classical, romantic, Dixieland, impressionistic, 12-tone, rhythm and blues, whatever. By form, I am referring to any musical form you can think of. Sonata form, 3-part song form, variations, a chain of waltzes, even a free fantasy, which is no particular form at all. You see, what really interests me is the response of those of you who don't recognize the piece, who don't know it, and who will arrive at your answers by instinct or by that process of elimination that I showed you just now in that bit by Brahms. But above all, I'm relying on your general musicality, your natural musicalness. So roll up your sleeves and tune up your ears. Now I'm going to tell you the answers. And you can keep your score by simply awarding yourselves 1 point for each correct answer you've made. The composer's name is Mozart. Good, good, good. Nationality, Austrian. I can see a lot of you said German. Well, that's understandable. Approximate date, late 18th century. It's a very happy audience. I'm pleased. You're very bright. Now, the music, which, by the way, was the overture to Mozart's opera, The Marriage of Figaro, is in a style known as classical. And the form of the overture is strict classical sonata form, which means that it has an exposition and a recapitulation where the themes of the exposition are restated. You remember all that from our program about sonata form? Now, between the exposition and the recapitulation should have come a development section. You remember about the development section? But there wasn't any, and that's the only thing in this sonata form piece that is not strict. All right, that's enough of the information department. Now I want to test your powers of observation and see how closely you were listening to that music. Here come 5 more questions about the music you've just heard. And just jot down the questions now, not the answers. And remember, if you know the answers, keep them to yourselves. 1, how many trombones were used in this piece? Now, just jot down how many trombones, or trombones, just shorthand. 2, did the piano have a solo to play during the recapitulation? Just jot down piano solo, right? 3, was that percussion instrument a tambourine or a snare drum? Just write tambourine, snare drum, percussion, whatever you want. Just to remind yourselves. 4th question. Mozart's opera, The Marriage of Figaro, is supposed to be famous for tunes everyone can whistle. Can you whistle the opening tune from the overture? Just write down whistle. 5. Where in this overture did Mozart use slow music for contrast? Just write slow music. Now I'm going to leave you for a minute or so to give you time to mull over these questions and jot down your answers. Think hard. I'll be right back. Hello again. Now, if you're ready with your answers, so am I. All of those 5 questions were trick questions, as some of you may have found out, but I wonder how many of you saw the tricks. The first answer about the trombones is this. There are, of course, no trombones at all in Mozart's overture. If your ears didn't tell you that, your eyes should have. You saw them sitting doing nothing. Second, about that piano solo, not only didn't the piano have a solo part, but there was no piano at all. Third, the only percussion instrument used by Mozart is the timpani, or kettle drum, nothing resembling a tambourine or a snare drum or a washboard or anything. Fourth, if you can whistle the opening theme, you're either some sort of genius or a great vaudeville act, because it's next to impossible. Absolutely out of the question. And fifth, Mozart used slow music by not writing any at all. The overture is a whirlwind from beginning to end. There you are. Now, those were 5 very sneaky questions. Sorry about that. But okay, score yourselves 1 point for each correct answer. Which means that the best score anyone can have so far is 10. And thus ends part 1 of our quiz. Now for part 2, which is called What's Wrong with This Picture? You know those puzzles they used to run in the Sunday newspapers, What's Wrong with This Picture? Well, this part of the quiz is like that. It will test your eyes as well as your ears, so heads up. We're going to play you 5 bits of that same Mozart overture, And in each bit, there will be something very obviously wrong, which you will usually be able to detect by sight. Here we go, and I want you to be all eyes and ears. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to write your answer. 1. Time's up. Now, obviously, what was wrong was the conductor, because I was very clearly beating in 3 music, which very clearly goes in 2. So it goes tigga-tigga-dum, tigga-tigga-tigga-tigga-tigga-dum, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I was beating tigga-tigga-dum, tigga-tigga-tigga-tigga-tigga-tigga-dum, which is like patting your stomach or whatever it is. You see, it was very wrong indeed. All right, let's go on to the next one. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Time's up. What was wrong that time? Well, what was wrong was again the conductor, me. Because I was happily making gestures at the violins during 4 bars in which they had nothing at all to play. All right, next. Oh, that was really too obvious. I mean, that's not fair. Everybody got that. But you realized I, again, was the culprit. Conducting very softly, music which is very loud. Now, anybody who didn't get that, deduct 169 points. And now, on to the next. How about that? Don't tell me, I'll tell you. Now, this time I was all right, but the orchestra wasn't. There was a very odd sound during that bit. And it was, of course, of all things, what? Right, a saxophone, which we have cunningly planted in the woodwind section, playing along with the flute. Would you like to meet him? Now, the saxophone wasn't invented until 50 years after Mozart died. So that sound had to be wrong. But even if you didn't know when the saxophone was invented, your musical instinct should have told you that the sound of a saxophone just doesn't belong in Mozart. And now, a grand final wrongness, to which I'm not even going to give you the answer. It's so obvious you'll know it right away. And I just can't resist doing it because it's such fun. Wow, how wrong can we get? But if you weren't wrong on these last 5 questions, you've now got 5 more points on your scorecard. All right, now that you're all indoctrinated into the secrets of form, style, beating, cueing, and orchestration, I have a very serious part 3 coming up. We're going to play you another short piece, and again, we're going to ask you to determine or recognize or guess at the same 5 answers as with the Mozart overture. The name of the composer, his nationality, his approximate historical period, plus the style of the music and its form, those same 5. Now, this piece will have many things in common with that Mozart overture. It's about the same length, it's in the same key, and there are lots of other resemblances I won't go into. I don't want to give it away, but I warn you, there is a trick here. So listen hard, and let's see what your ears tell you. charming piece, isn't it? But a tricky one, because in spite of it sounding just like Mozart, this music was written 128 years after Mozart died. That's really a kind of takeoff on Mozart and Haydn and company. All right, I won't keep you in suspense anymore. What we played was the first movement of the so-called classical symphony by the modern Russian composer Prokofiev. How does that jibe with your first three answers? Name, Prokofiev. Nationality, Russian. Approximate period, early 20th century. Surprised? And the style, not classical, but neoclassical. Now that may be a hard word for those of you who haven't studied music, but it's really easy to understand. It means classical in style, but modern in treatment, therefore neoclassical. As for the form, it was good old strict classical sonata form, just like the Mozart overture, only this time even including a development section. All right, that's 5 more points, and that ends part 3 of our quiz. Anyone who has answered every question correctly so far must now have a score of 20, and that person will someday be the conductor of the New York Philharmonic. Now, I'm going to let the orchestra rest a while and toss you a series of pitches from the piano. Some slow balls and some fast and some curves. The name of this game is True or False. Now, I'm going to make 10 statements, each one followed by a little example on the piano, and you are to write true or false for each statement. Is that clear? Okay, here goes. 1. This is a major scale. 2. This is a major scale. 3. This is a waltz. 4. This is a waltz. 5. This is a waltz. 6. The following 2 phrases are absolutely identical. 1, 2. True or false? 7. All sad music is in the minor, like this sad song. I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. True or false? 8. This music was written to be a television commercial about a detergent. You, Mrs. Hammerschmidt, could you maybe lend me a little detergent? Mrs. Laufersweiler, please come in. Borrowing like this is just a sin. True or false? 9. This music was written especially to be the theme music of the Huntley-Brinkley Report. And finally, 10, this music was written expressly to be the theme of a television program called Dragnet. Game's over. Let's check your score. Of the 10 statements, the first 4 were all false, and the 5th was true. The next 4 were all false, and the last one was true. If you didn't do as well as you hoped, don't be upset, because this was a kind of speed test, after all, and there were all mostly fast pitches, and there were lots of curves, too. For instance, the first statement that I made, this is a major scale, that was easy because it was obviously a minor scale. You probably all got that. But the second one sounded very much like a major scale. Only it wasn't. It was the Mixolydian mode. You remember that from our program last year on modes? Then, out of the 3 waltz questions that followed, only the last one was really a waltz, the famous one from Rosenkavalier. But the other 2 were the habanera from Carmen, which is no waltz at all, but a tango of a sort. And then there was a very tricky one, because the other one was a Strauss waltz tune, Tales from the Vienna Woods, only played in 2/4 time. And no waltz can go in 2/4 time. It has to go in 3/4 time. As for that melody I played twice in a row, it was definitely altered the second time around. That third note. Then, of course, the famous Beatles song is not in the minor at all, but in the major, Sad Though It May Be. Nothing could be more major than that. And the detergent commercial, of course, is really Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers from the Nutcracker Suite. It was not written expressly for that detergent commercial. And the Huntley-Brinkley music was not written for that either. It's really the scherzo from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, right? It is only the Dragnet theme that was really written to be the Dragnet theme. Now, of course, I didn't expect you to know all these peculiar facts, only to be able to identify the statements as true or false by instinct or whatever other means you have. And if you did, you've earned 10 more points. So the maximum possible score now is 30. Now, while I have the piano handy, I'd like to take a moment for the benefit of those among you who do have some knowledge about music and are dying to show it off. There are brainy ones here, I'm sure, who feel very condescended to. We're making everything too easy, so we give you a break. Take your pencils, brainy ones. Here are 10 short questions about musical terms. 1. What is this called? 2. This is going to go fast, I warn you. What word describes the distance between any 2 notes? For instance, between this note and this note, or between this note and this note. Same word describes both. 3. Here are a bunch of notes all at once. What do you call that? 4. Here are the same bunch of notes again, only not all at once. What do you call that? 5. What is the musical term for what I'm doing now? 6. What's the musical term for what I'm doing now? Too easy. 7. Here's a note, C. Here's another note, C. Same note. What's the difference? 8. What is the name for this kind of scale? And 9. What's the word for this stunt? And 10, and last, if I play an accompaniment in one key and the tune in another key, what word is used to describe this phenomenon? Okay, that's it. Time's up. Check your list. The answers are 1. Trill. 2. Interval. 3. Chord. 4. Arpeggio. 5. Crescendo, getting louder. And of course 6 is diminuendo or decrescendo, getting softer. And 7, octave higher. 8, chromatic scale. 9, glissando. You're learning? And 10, bitonality. Brother, there's a mouthful. Anyone with those 10 words in his vocabulary can be the life of the party. Imagine being able to say, didn't you just adore the chromatic bitonality of that crescendo arpeggio? It'll get you very far in life. Anyway, the maximum possible score is now 40. And enough with the terminology. Back to the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, which has been loafing for 10 minutes. Awake, gentlemen. Time for Rimsky-Korsakov. We're going to play part of his brilliant Capriccio Español, or Spanish Caprice. And here we have another case of a Russian composer writing un-Russian music, just as Prokofiev did in his classical symphony. Now, this Spanish Caprice is famous for being one of the great landmarks of orchestration. It really tests an orchestra and has lots of difficult solos for individual players. Now, the part we're going to play, which is the final section, starts with a series of free, improvised sounding passages, which are called cadenzas, which show off different members of the orchestra or groups within the orchestra. And your job now is to keep track of these 5 cadenzas, writing down the instruments that are playing them. And then we'll check on you afterwards. Pretty flashy stuff, isn't it? Those players sure aren't loafing now. Well, here now are the 5 answers regarding those cadenzas. And I'll bet you got more right this time than you have so far on the whole quiz. First, there was a cadenza for brass instruments only, trumpets and French horns, accompanied by a roll on the snare drum, but you don't have to have said that. Second, a cadenza for the solo violin. That was fairly obvious. The third cadenza was for flute alone. The fourth for clarinet alone. And the 5th and last cadenza was for the harp. Good. Now, the maximum possible total is now 45 points. Now, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to repeat those cadenzas we just played, now that you know the instruments in advance, so that you can just listen and relax and enjoy the music without having to worry about taking a test. And we'll simply keep going past the harp cadenza, going on through this Spanish fandango right to the end of the piece. You don't have any further worries about questions to be answered. Of course, if you should notice as we go along a chromatic scale here, a glissando there, I won't mind at all. Wait. I have one more question to ask you, the most important one of all. And this one is worth 5 premium points. Did you enjoy it?
From Philharmonic Hall in Lincoln Center, the season's 4th New York Philharmonic Young People's Concert under the musical direction of Leonard Bernstein has presented a quiz concert titled How Musical Are You? Featured in today's performance were the overture to Mozart's opera The Marriage of Figaro, the first movement of Prokofiev's classical symphony, and the gypsy scene and fandango from Rimsky-Korsakov's Capriccio Espagnole. Earlier this season, celebrating the 125th anniversaries of both the New York and Vienna Philharmonic, Mr. Bernstein presented a toast to Vienna in 3/4 time, with music by Mozart, Beethoven, Johann Strauss, Richard Strauss, and songs from Mahler's Das Knaben Wunderhorn with guest artists Christa Ludwig and Walter Berry. The annual Young Performers program introduced Lawrence Foster, cellist, and Martin and Stephen Van, duo pianists, in works by Saint-Saëns and Weber. Alois Springer and Helen Kwok, conductors, made their television debut with the New York Philharmonic, and Mr. Bernstein conducted portions of Symphonic Metamorphosis by Hindemith. This program was recorded in Philharmonic Hall and was produced and directed by Roger Englander.